The trial of Lori Vallow Daybell has been fascinating, to say the least. Disheartening, extremely sad, and disturbing all at the same time. All this weekend, we are taking a look back at some of the most compelling testimony and conversations surrounding the case of Lori Vallow Daybell. Here's another one. Hope you're having a great weekend. This is our week in review. It's a look back at some of the most compelling and interesting stories that we've been covering for you of the past week. Brand new episodes back again Monday. Press subscribe so you don't miss any of it.
This is an examination of the hidden human condition.
This is the Hidden Killers Podcast.
The Hidden Killers Podcast.
With Tony Bruschi.
That it is, and what we are about to listen to is the testimony of Summer Shiflet in the trial of Lori Vallow Daybell. Summer is the sister of Lori Vallow, and this testimony, right up there, if not, I think, more impactful than that of even Bryan, Lori's son, surviving son, that testified last week in the trial. We're about to hear a phone call between Lori and Summer. This is a phone call that was made after the children were discovered to be deceased and buried in the backyard. Lori is in jail at the time, and it's one of the creepiest phone calls I think I've ever heard in my life. You're also going to hear her testimony as well. This is her testimony from the trial of Lori Vallow Daybell. Take a listen.
Okay, we're back on the record on CR 22-21-1624, State of Idaho versus Lori Noreen Vallow. Mr. Thomas is conducting cross-examination of the witness, Mr. Balance. You can continue with your cross if you'd like at this time, Mr. Thomas.
Thank you, Your Honor. Mr. Balance, or Special Agent Balance, we were just about to talk a little bit about drive testing. Can you tell me what type of equipment is involved in that?
Yeah, so what we're using is what's called a GAR, which is a Gladiator Autonomous Receiver. And basically what that equipment does is it collects the different RF frequencies that are being broadcast by the different cellular providers in a specific area. So in order to take measurements, you would need to drive or move that gear around. Typically, we'll do it with a car. And as we drive, it's constantly taking measurements of the different radio frequency that it's detecting with those sensors that it's utilizing. Once we get all of those particular measurements, that's whenever we would take it back into a software mapping program and would look at, and we can basically filter out specific towers and sectors and what that true coverage would look like for each individual one that it detected.
And you said you did this particular test in June of 2020?
Yes, sir. That's correct.
And how long does that test take?
So it depends on the area that we're specifically driving. So if we're just doing one tower and sector, you could feasibly do that in a day. Again, it depends on if you're looking at just a tower and sector that's in downtown Boise, the coverage area probably is not going to go out nearly as far as in a rural area. So we're driving basically to the next tower and a little bit beyond to see how far that coverage goes. When you're talking about a rural area or you're talking about doing an entire city like Rexburg, it took us driving better part of a week to complete it.
And that was Rexburg, Sugar City, St. Anthony, the whole area that's in your CAST report?
Correct.
That only took you a week to do?
Correct.
All right. And this Gladiator Autonomous Receiver, is this a piece of equipment that is a government issue, or is this something that is in the industry?
So it's in the industry. The company that produces is Gladiator.
Okay. I believe you indicated on direct examination that you cannot, there's no way you could ever be able to tell where a phone was located 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.
Correct. What I mean by that is that it depends on, we have to have a record from one of the carriers for a specific date and time. So if we don't have a record for a specific date and time, then we're not able to estimate a location at that particular date and time. And then on top of that as well, it's dependent on the records. So if we're looking at a tower and sector that provides coverage to a large area, then the area we estimate that phone is going to be much larger than certain types of records that we receive, like from the Google location, that have a much smaller margin of error.
And in this particular case, the sectors are vast, right? I mean, they're huge.
There's several towers in this case that have coverage areas that are large, yes.
Okay. And so when you're saying that a particular phone is within a particular sector, I mean, that could be 40, 50 square miles, right?
It depends on the tower and sector, but it could be a large area.
Okay, let's talk about in this case. How large are these areas?
So without having measurements on the map to determine the square area, I mean, I think what you're getting at is that there's a large area. So if you look at particularly that tower that is in St. Anthony, it has coverage that goes down almost into Rexburg. So depending, again, without having, a ruler and being able to map out that exact area, I'll definitely say it's a large area.
Okay, so if I was to tell you between St. Anthony and Rexburg, it's about 12 to 15 miles in one direction, just going down the highway.
Okay.
And would that make sense to say, well, it's probably 12 miles one direction, and then there's also another slice of the pie, which covers maybe, another 12, 15, 20 miles square?
I mean, again, without looking at it on a map, I don't want to abstractly say what the square mileage would be.
Okay. And so when you're, when the prosecutor was examining you and we had all these charts and very great charts if you know what you're doing and if you know what you're looking at. But for the layperson like me or something, it's a little bit difficult. And so what I want to know is there any way to say that based on those charts, based on your readings of those charts and based on your readings of those of all that data, that there's any way you can pinpoint to say that anybody was on the Chad Daybell area or in the Chad Daybell complex or homestead without looking at the GPS?
So if we're excluding completely the Google location history and we're only looking at the phones, the best way you would be able to tell whether or not a device was near the Chad Daybell residence is whenever you have two different towers and sectors being utilized in close proximity in time and they have overlapping coverage. It still would not, in my opinion, be able to tell you that it was at the Chad Daybell residence. You would only be able to say that it's consistent with it being at the Chad Daybell residence, but it also could be in any of those overlapping areas that appear on the map.
So would that be considered triangulation, or when you're using cell towers to triangulate to try to find where a person is or where a person's phone would be?
Somewhat. Usually triangulation is based off of the measurement from particular towers, and then whenever you have multiple, the more that you have, the more you can overlap those measurements away from a particular tower. When we're talking about the drive test, what we're looking at is the true coverage area of a tower and sector compared with the true coverage area of a second tower and sector. And what that gives us is that overlap, which can be as you can see from some of the maps, that shape is not exactly circular or representative of, defining lines. It can look more like a cloud than anything else.
Okay. But based on the evidence that you've seen, based on the data that you've crunched, you couldn't place anybody at the Daybell residence based on the cell data alone. There was no triangulation. You didn't use two towers in any of the charts that I saw. Is that right?
So I did use multiple towers in some of them. And what I would say is that I wouldn't be able to definitively say that that phone was only at the Daybell residence.
Okay. Let's talk a little bit about September 23rd. I believe you indicated that Chad Daybell's phone and Alex Cox's phone were both at the same area of Chad Daybell's home. Is that right?
So when we're looking at just the phone separate from the Google location history, what you could see is that Alex Cox's phone, the number ending 9120, was utilizing a Verizon tower. And then the number, and I'm going to mess up the last four, but starting with 515 for Chad Daybell's number, that's utilizing the AT&T network. So it's utilizing two different networks and then looking at the coverage area of the towers being utilized by the Daybell phone utilizing the AT&T network versus the Verizon phone utilizing the Verizon network.
But you couldn't put them on the same property at the same time based on that data.
I can't put them in the exact same location. I can only put them within the coverage area of those towers and sectors.
Okay. And again, those coverage areas are miles and miles apart, right?
Yes, correct.
Okay. All right. And how long were Alex Cox and Chad Daybell within the coverage area together on September 23rd?
I would have to look back at the slides to see the exact times, but again, it's dependent on whenever we see those records. So as an example, if you're looking at a time of 9:21 and there's a record at 9:21, then there's also a record at, say, 9:42, I can't say between that time any estimated location of where a phone is. I can only estimate the location at those given times in the records.
Can you explain to the jury again, because I was a little confused about this as well, explain to the jury again why you can sometimes read text messages that were given as you did in your cast report, and sometimes you just say that there's an SMS message or that there's a text message?
Absolutely. So there's two ways that you can get to the two general ways that you can get to the content of a text message. You could do it either by looking at the phone, and basically what we would do in law enforcement would be a forensic download of that phone to pull all the data off of there. So it's dependent on an examiner of what files are there, if something's deleted, whether it's recoverable. That's separate from what I'm doing. Typically what I'm doing is I'm looking at interactions between a particular carrier and a phone, not per se what's in the phone itself. So whenever I'm doing that, it's dependent on what records are maintained by each individual carrier. So at the time, whenever this investigation was going on and the dates that I was looking for, Verizon was the only carrier that maintains content of text messages for a window of anywhere between 3 and 7 days. It just depends on their specific, how many text messages go across a specific account. So after that, they don't retain them. The other carriers don't retain text messages. So the only way that I would be able to review the content of text messages would be if there was a forensic download of the phone and those messages were recoverable, or we obtained records from a Verizon phone within that short window of time.
And I believe you indicated you did find some content on Chad Daybell's phone. Is that right?
Yes, that was on one of the Verizon phones.
Okay. And you got that content within 3 to 7 days of it being made, of the text being made?
That search warrant would have not been done by me. Typically, an investigator will serve a search warrant, obtain data from a cell phone provider, and then send that data to us to conduct analysis on. So I couldn't speak to when that search warrant was done.
Okay. So you indicated a lot of GPS location on Alex Cox. You didn't have any GPS locations on Lori Vallow or Chad Daybell, is that right?
I did not, no.
Okay. You didn't use that in any of your analysis?
I didn't have it to use.
Okay. Were you aware of how long Lori and Alex had lived in this particular area of Rexford?
Roughly. I know they were somewhat new to the area, but as far as dates, no, I'm not aware.
If I were to tell you that they had moved there September the 1st of that same year, it's 2019, and all these records look like they're from September the 1st through October, November, December of 2019. Does that make sense?
So I know I had records prior to September the 1st, but I don't recall mapping those out to see like when those devices first started showing up in Rexburg.
Okay. So given the fact that they had moved there, if you wouldn't mind just assuming that they had moved there on September the 1st, there's no way that you could make any type of assumptions based on patterns of behavior for where these people were going or what they were doing, right?
Suggestion, speculation.
Overruled.
I mean, what I was going to say is that typically when I speak on other cases, the more data we have, so for instance, if I'm looking for an individual that's wanted by law enforcement, typically what I would do is I would look at 30 days historically to try and get a pattern of what that phone's doing during those 30 days. And so, I mean, I would agree to you from the standpoint of the more records I have to establish what's called a pattern of life would be better.
But you've indicated that in other cases you have established a pattern of life based on a 30-day time period?
A version of pattern of life. Again, it's dependent on the records because I think like everybody in this courtroom has, you know, a routine or something that they typically do. And if we were to examine records for the past 30 days versus for the past year, you would either see major changes or you might see the same thing. It just depends on everybody's particular situation.
Okay. On October the 19th, the date that Tammy Daybell passed away, or the 18th, you believe that Lori's phone was in Hawaii, is that right?
So from the record that I showed at that particular time, that device was in Hawaii. And then I would add to that, too, that, you know, it's not right around the corner. So it would take, you know, travel to get to Hawaii.
Right. All right. Thank you. I have no further questions.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Thomas. Any redirect from the state?
Just one moment, Your Honor. Defense counsel asked you about GPS location data for Lori Daybell and Chad. Lori Vallow or Lori Daybell and Chad Daybell, correct?
Yes, correct.
Is it possible to turn the GPS geolocation data off on your phone?
It is. So as I mentioned before, especially with Google, that location services is based off of whether a user wants to opt in or out. And so as part of their privacy protections, you can opt out of your location being maintained by Google.
That's all I have.
Very well. That will conclude the testimony of this witness then. Is this witness going to be recalled or can he be excused from any subpoena?
Your Honor, at this time, we wouldn't excuse him from a subpoena.
Would not?
No, thank you.
All right. Agent Balance, then you are still under subpoena, subject to the direction of the state. If there's a potential you'll be recalled, I'll instruct you that I'll ask you again whether or not you've viewed any of the trial testimony. So if you're intending to testify again, you're not allowed to view that based on the exclusionary rule that's been ordered in this case. So with that in mind, then you can go ahead and be excused. The bailiff will help assist you out of court, and the state could call its next witness.
Your Honor, Spencer Ramel for the state. Can we have a quick sidebar before we call this next witness, please?
Yes.
Thank you.
All right, Mr. Ramel, then you can call your next witness.
Thank you, Your Honor. The state would call Summer Shiflet.
Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
right, before we get started then, I'll note that the court has previously designated this particular witness as a representative under Idaho's victims laws, so the exclusionary rule would not apply as to this witness, whether or not she's watched any trial testimony. So I'll just advise you then, Ms. Shiflet, when you're being questioned, please use verbal responses so we get your answers on the record. Please avoid talking at the same time as anyone asking you a question. Wait for their question to be complete. That way we'll also keep the record clear, and with those ground rules in mind, then, Mr. Ramel, you can go ahead and inquire on your direct examination.
Thank you, Your Honor. Good morning, Ms. Shiflet.
Good morning.
Can I please have you state your full name and spell your last name for the record?
Summer Shiflet, S-H-I-F-L-E-T.
Ms. Shiflet, how do you know the defendant in this case?
She's my sister.
Lori Vallow Daybell. You're fine.
She's my sister.
And is she your older sister?
Yes.
And this is obvious without asking, Ms. Shiflet, but can I have you clarify for the record how that makes you related to J.J. Vallow and Tylee Ryan?
Tylee and J.J. were my niece and nephew.
And did you...
I'm sorry to interrupt you, Ms. Shiflet. If you don't mind, if you can kind of lean forward right to the microphone and talk into it, we'll make sure to pick up the recording.
Okay.
Thank you.
And did you play an active role in your niece and nephew's life?
Yes.
When were you first made aware that your niece and nephew were missing?
I think through the media, but probably December of 2019.
And at that time, December of 2019, were you in contact with your sister?
No.
Were you aware of where she was located at that time?
No.
Ms. Shiflet, have you had a close relationship with your sister?
Yes.
At some point, did you talk to your sister and ask her about JJ and Tylee's well-being?
Yes. I think our first contact was in February of 2019 after she had been arrested.
And what did she tell you about JJ and Tylee?
I don't remember the exact wording, but she basically told me that she was aware of where they were and that they were safe.
Ms. Shiflet, fair to say that you trusted what she told you?
Yes.
You believed your sister when she stated to you that JJ and Tylee were safe?
Yes.
I'm going to draw your attention to early June of 2020, when JJ and Tylee's bodies were found. You testified that you trusted your sister. After the discovery of JJ and Tylee, did that change?
Yes.
Why?
I felt lied to, and my trust in my sister was broken.
Ms. Shiflet, a recording of a video visit between yourself and Ms. Vallow Daybell has previously been admitted in this case. Do you recall the date of that specific video call?
I believe it was on June 24th. I had received a request for me to call her.
And just for clarification of the record, do you recall the year?
2020.
Your Honor, can I be handed what has previously been admitted as State's Exhibit 34A?
Yes.
And, Your Honor, having been previously admitted, I now ask to publish what has been previously admitted and marked as State's Exhibit 34A to the jury.
All right, give me just a moment to confer with the clerks, please. All right, permission to publish is granted, Mr. Rammel.
Thank you, Judge.
And I don't know you because you would have never done anything like what's on TV. That's it. That has nothing to do with TV. This is your and my conversations. Before you left and cut me off. And now you expect me to be there for you when you were going to abandon me. And if you weren't in jail, you wouldn't even be talking to me. And we wouldn't even know they were dead still. This is your opinion. Yes! I deserve more than that. I've been there for you like a rock. And I went on TV and defended you. I've done everything to defend you. And I still would right now if you would tell me the truth. I would love to. I would love Well, then, you didn't want to in October, November, December, January, or February when you weren't in jail. Why didn't you tell us then? Why you didn't call me when Alex died, which now I'm glad he's gone, if he was a part of this, but you didn't call to tell me Alex died or that your kids are gone, nothing. You don't think that's going to cause pain throughout our entire family? Yes, you really did. You don't think I'm missing? No, I don't. I think you were dancing on the beach having a great time. Getting married. And you took pictures to prove your kids don't deserve a burial, but you need to get wedding pictures? You don't think that's upsetting? Nobody knows. I'm sorry. And nobody knows except for you and the Lord. Yeah, ask him. I have. And guess what? I don't have one scripture that says it's okay for children to be thrown away like garbage in the ground. And that's okay. There is nothing in the scriptures that is godly about hurting a child. Nothing. And they deserve a proper burial with family that loves them at the least. I can't support that. That's hurtful to everyone. That's the most selfish, incredibly selfish thing I can think of. I can't think of anything worse. I don't understand. I don't understand. This is not my Lolo that I've known and loved. I've never even seen you be upset with your kids. I went to bed and you said that to everyone. I never had to. How can you just go on without them, without any upsetness, and without telling us anything, and then expect us to understand? Nobody in the world knows what I've been through. And I don't expect you to. All you see is what's on TV, what everybody says, and all that. No, that's not. So all people around. Okay, so now no, deceased. Say that. Everyone in the world is deceived except for you. Don't say that. Say nobody's seen me on the floor crying. Nobody knows what I've been through. My children that I love more than anything. Lori, you were dancing on a beach with a smile on your face, taking wedding photos. Trying to go on with life. You don't see me trying to find some kind of happiness. You think I want to be alone? Do you think that your mother and your sister and your son don't deserve to know that the children are gone? Why wouldn't you call and tell us that? Why were we cut off? You saying you want to go on and be happy? You're just going to be happy without your family and your life until you're stuck in jail and I'm the only one stupid enough to be your friend when I've been your best supporter, Lori. I've loved you my whole life. I still do. I can't bear to see But there is nothing okay about this. Nothing. If you think it's okay, well, you have to say about this is okay. This is okay. Nothing about this is okay, Summer. Lori, we have all read the scriptures. I know you told me about a lot of your spiritual experiences. You know I'm trying to support you in all of them. But I am telling you, because I love you with all my heart, please consider that Chad has lied and been deceived, and that you have been deceived, and that this is not what you think it is. There is nothing okay about killing children. Nothing. And even if you didn't kill them, and Dad didn't kill them, and Alex didn't kill them, you threw them away like garbage in the ground. You tried both of her. You think I did that too? I can't handle that. And threw her in a bag, shoved her. You know that's such a great guy. You must have picked that. I don't understand. It's so painful, I can't even tell you. I don't know what else to say, but please consider that you have been deceived. And that is not Christ-like. There's nothing good in that. There's nothing good in that. That's not a test for you. They were innocent. And they were loved. And they didn't deserve to be loved their whole life. They took care of them their whole life. Nate. Then why would you let him be buried that way? I didn't. Well, then come up with an explanation publicly. Go ahead.
Your Honor, if that's all I have for this witness. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Rammel. All right, Exhibit 34A has been returned to the court clerk. Is there cross-examination, Mr. Archibald?
I'm sorry you had to relive that.
Thank you.
So just some foundation to give some background here. You're Lori's younger sister, you said?
Yes.
And you're one of how many children?
I'm the youngest of 5.
And who's the oldest child?
Stacy, my oldest sister.
And is she alive or is she deceased?
She's deceased.
And did she have any children before she died?
Yes.
And who would that be?
My niece, Melanie.
Okay. Is that who we've heard the name Melanie Pedro or Melanie Pulowski? Is that Stacy's child?
Yes.
Okay. And then who's next after Stacy?
Alex.
And then Alex Cox is who we've heard that name during this trial as well. How much older is he than you?
I think 8 years.
Okay. And then who's next after Alex?
Adam.
And Adam Cox, where does he live now?
St. George, Utah.
Okay. And then, and he was a friend of Charles Vallow?
Yes.
Okay. And then who's next after Adam?
Well, my parents had a child that died. Her name was Laura Lee. We called her Lolly. But she died before I was born.
Okay. How old was she when she died?
6 weeks.
Okay. And then after her, who was next?
Lori.
And so Lori is how much older than you?
2 years.
And so you and Lori grew up together?
Yes.
And you grew up together where?
In Rialto, California.
And how old were you when you moved away from California?
I'm sorry, I didn't catch that.
How old were you, or how long did you live in California?
I think until I was about 17 or 18.
Okay. So you and Lori would have been adults by the time that you moved away from California?
Yes.
So would you how would you describe your relationship with Lori growing up?
I feel like we had a close relationship. We had a lot of similar interests and friends in common, and we did a lot of activities together.
Okay. Go to schools together?
Yes.
Go to church together?
Yes.
How would you describe your family life?
I think we had a good family. I mean, we had problems, but we also had a lot of fun.
Okay. And do you remember when Lori, her first marriage?
Yes.
Do you remember how old she was?
It was right out of high school, so I think 18.
So she was 18 and you were 16 when that happened?
Yeah.
And did that marriage last long?
No.
Do you remember her second marriage?
Yes.
And who was that to?
William LaJoya.
And is that the father of Colby, who we met here last week?
Yes.
Okay. And did that marriage last long?
Longer than the first, but not that long.
Okay. And then did Lori get married again?
Yes.
And who was her third husband?
Joseph Ryan.
And is Joseph Ryan the father of Tylee Ryan?
Yes.
And during this time of these relationships that Lori was having, did you stay close with Lori?
Off and on.
When did you get married?
In 2000.
And so did you have your own life that you were trying to live as well?
Yes.
And did you try to maintain good contact with Lori?
Yes, but we lived in 2 different states, so it was more challenging.
Okay. And you have children of your own?
Yes.
And how many children do you have?
3.
Okay. And do you recall when Lori separated from Joe Ryan?
Yes.
And did Lori protect Colby and Tylee from Joe Ryan?
Yes.
All right. And so when you talk on this phone call with your sister Lori, that you would have never done anything to harm your children. Is that the way you felt?
Yes.
Okay. And that's because of seeing her raise Colby and Tylee and JJ.
Yes.
Did you also get to know Charles Vallow?
Yes.
And if you can briefly tell us about the relationship between Charles and Lori?
I think they had a great relationship in the beginning, and they seemed very compatible, and they seemed very happy.
And they adopted JJ?
Yes.
And were you involved in your sister's life when that happened?
Yes.
Were you involved in your sister's life when Lori and Charles separated?
Yes.
Were you aware that Charles had filed for divorce?
I'm not sure if I knew that until it came out in the media, because I don't think she was ever served.
Okay. And then they, as far as you knew, they had reconciled?
Yes.
Okay. So, were you a part of Lori's life when Charles and JJ moved to Texas?
Yes. Not as close, but yes.
Okay. Were you a part of Lori's life when the whole family had moved to Hawaii?
Yes.
Now, was Hawaii a destination that your family had gone to as well when you were a child?
I had been there one time as a child, and then I didn't go back again until I was a married adult.
Okay.
Oh, I'm sorry. I did go back one time before I got married, so I had 2 trips before I got married.
Okay. And so was that a place that your father and mother had taken you and the family?
Yes.
All right. How did you see Tylee grow up?
Yes.
How would you describe Tylee?
I would describe her as beautiful and witty and very talented in a lot of different ways.
Did she have health issues in her life?
Yes.
Do you remember what those were?
She had pancreatitis several times.
And do you know what that is?
It's a swelling of your pancreas.
Was that something that required hospitalization?
Yes.
Okay. And were you able to see Tylee and Lori together?
Yes.
And can you describe that?
I think Lori was a loving mother, and Tylee adored her mother. They fought sometimes. Tylee had a little sassy streak in her, but I always felt like Lori was very patient with her.
Were you ever concerned about the safety of Tylee around Lori?
No.
Would you ever imagine your sister wanting to kill her kids?
No.
Would you ever imagine your sister being involved in conspiring to kill her kids?
No.
Now, the way you were you raised in a way to believe in Jesus?
Yes.
And the Jesus that you were taught about, was that a Jesus who was kind and loving?
Yes.
And is that how you were taught?
Yes.
And is that how Lori was taught?
Yes.
And is that how Lori taught her children?
Yes.
So, did you ever hear your sister talk about multiple lives?
She and Alex had both mentioned that to me, I think, in late 2018.
Okay.
It's the first time.
Was that something new?
Yes.
Was that something that you had been taught as children?
No.
Did you ask Lori where this new belief was coming from?
I don't know if I asked her that directly.
Did she talk about multiple creations?
Yes.
Being reincarnated as different people over the eons of time. Is that what she was telling you?
Not with the word reincarnated, but yes.
Okay. So they weren't using the word reincarnated, but multiple probations, multiple creations.
Correct.
And is that something new that you had heard?
It was new to me.
Had you ever heard Lori talk about being someone in another life prior to late 2018?
No.
At this time in late 2018 or early 2019, did she tell you that she had been someone else in another life?
Prior to 2018?
Prior to 2018?
No.
In late 2018 or 2019, did she tell you that?
Yes.
Did she tell you about her previous lives?
Yes.
Did any of that make sense to you?
Not really.
Did you believe it?
I tried to. I wanted to believe her, but it didn't make sense.
Did she tell you in late 2018, 2019 about zombies?
Your Honor, at this point I'm going to object to hearsay. Ms. Vallow Daybell is not a party opponent as to the defense. The exception does not apply.
Let me think about that for just a minute. Mr. Rammel, Can you further explain why you think the exception would not apply here and why this would be hearsay?
Judge, I think the exception, he's asking specifically for statements of his client. She is a party opponent of the state. The party opponent, from the state's perspective, wouldn't apply to Ms. Vallow, who is the client of Mr. Archibald.
All right, what's your response to that, Mr. Archibald?
Your Honor, this is just some foundation. I think the jury's already heard bits and pieces of this. This is just to confirm that information.
It's been admitted in this state's case in chief, and I do find that it's relevant and would not be hearsay. So I'll overrule the objection and allow the witness to answer that last question, which was, and I'll just cite, did she tell you in late 2018, 2019 about zombies was the question. So you can answer.
I don't recall her ever telling me about zombies, that word. I don't remember her ever using that terminology.
Okay. Did she talk to you about her ability to cast out evil spirits?
I believe so.
Did she tell you about light and dark scales?
Yes.
And is that something that you'd heard before that time period?
Never.
Did she tell you that she was a goddess?
I don't recall if she used that terminology.
Did she tell you that she was a leader of the 144,000?
No.
Did she tell you that there was a new church called the Church of the Firstborn?
I don't recall her ever telling me that specifically.
Okay. Were you concerned about your sister with her new beliefs?
I don't know that I was concerned about safety of anybody. I just was concerned. I mean, of course I care about my sister, but I didn't really know what to think about it. Okay. So I don't know if concerned is the right word.
Okay, that's fair enough. How was your relationship with Alex?
I was close with Alex.
Now, can you tell the jury what he was like?
Well, he was my big brother, and sometimes he was hilarious and fun, and sometimes he was kind of crude or obnoxious in a way. But most of the time we got along really well, and he was at my house most weekends playing games with my kids.
And did he have children of his own?
No.
Did he suffer a brain injury as a teenager?
Yes.
And what was that, from a car accident?
Yes.
And did that brain injury in that car accident, did that affect him?
I believe it did.
Was he different after that car accident than he was before?
He seemed almost stuck in making like teenage decisions. He got in his car accident at 16, and he kind of made decisions like a 16-year-old most of his life. So
he was, that's what you observed, is that he was stuck as a teenager?
In his decision making, yes.
Okay. Do you stay in touch with Colby Ryan?
Yes.
And Colby had previously stated, my mom spent her whole life protecting us kids. Would you agree with that?
Yes.
Colby also stated after she met Chad Daybell, she changed. Would you agree with that?
Yes.
Thank you for your testimony.
All right, thank you, Mr. Archibald. So to clarify there, counsel had requested of the court prior that the defense was going to call Ms. Shiflet as their own witness, so the court permitted the defense to go beyond cross. and have a direct examination essentially there. So with that then, Mr. Rammel, if you'd like to conduct cross and or redirect, you can do so.
Thank you, Judge. Just very quickly. Ms. Shiflet, just a couple questions for you. I'm going to draw your attention back to the time period in which you were made aware that JJ and Tylee were missing. You testified that your sister told you that she knew where Tylee was?
I don't remember if she used that wording, but yes, that was what was relayed to me.
Okay, and conveyed to you that she knew where JJ was?
Yes.
She told you that they were safe?
Yes.
Ms. Shiflet, she lied to you about them being safe?
I believe so, yes.
Judge, that's all I have.
All right. That will conclude then the testimony of Ms. Shiflet. Is she allowed to be excused from any subpoena she's under at this time?
Your Honor, that would be the state's request.
All right. Does the defense have any reason to not have her released from the subpoena?
No, Your Honor. No objection.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Archibald. Ms. Shiflet, then you can go ahead and be escorted out of the courtroom by the bailiff. Thank you for your testimony.
Your Honor, you just asked that she be escorted out of the courtroom. I believe she's allowed to stay with.
Oh, I appreciate
if she so wishes.
Yes, she is, and an excused witness can also maintain. I just was having her taken back so she's able to remain. And then the state, you can call your next witness at this time.
This is an examination of the hidden human condition.
This is the Hidden Killers Podcast.
The Hidden Killers Podcast.
With Tony Bruschi.
So sad. And those scars and the pain that that woman bears because of her evil sister. I don't know. I don't know how she continues on, but she's a strong woman to do so. If you like the podcast, press subscribe wherever you're downloading it so you don't miss any breaking updates or discussions on the cases that we're following for you right here. My name's Tony Bruschi. Stay with us.